But I think the development of full artificial intelligence would spell the end of the human race.
It's a flying object, and we don't know what it is. I would hope somebody's checking it out.
I don't know whether rockets or whatever, but incredibly fast, opposite direction. They were too fast to be an airplane.
I'm glad the Pentagon is looking at this, because if it poses a threat, I want them on top.
Well, the craft generates its own gravitational field.
You said there's lights in the sky?
The internet has become the command center for criminals and terrorists.
911, what's your emergency? I need help, please help!
Aliens won't let it happen. You know, that's what we're instructed to say.
Roswell, Area 51. Alien kept deep under the ground.
1, 0,
doesn't have your best interest in mind. The government is self-serving. You're here for a reason. You're listening to Troubled Minds Radio. Broadcasting live from a secret bunker just off the extraterrestrial highway. Somewhere in the desert sands outside of Las Vegas. From somewhere in space-time, loosely labeled Generation X on planet Earth. And asking questions of you in earnest into the digital darkness. Well, good evening and welcome to Troubled Minds Radio. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting. And, of course, 88.4 FM, Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight, well, we did dragons last time with Darcy Weir. Tonight we're going to do wizards. From dragons to wizards is a perfect segue. And we'll be here with Dave Lovegrove tonight. Let's get him in here, actually. Thank you for clicking the button there. But yeah, lots of things going on with this. Now, as usual, when you look at the past and you look at sort of the historical, in this case, the sagas of old, the old Icelandic sagas and the Norse mythology and this type of stuff, there's tons of amazing things in there that kind of don't get enough light of day, enough discussion. They do in the ancient astronaut theorist type circles, but beyond that, it kind of just gets skipped over as, just, it's a metaphor, Mike. It's just a metaphor. Like, why are you thinking about this? Why are you talking about this? Well, that's where this begins, because there's an amazing part of this, and we'll get to Dave. Just accept the invite there, Dave, with the hand, and then pop on up, and then unmute, and you're on Troubled Minds. But there's this thing called the Ynglinga saga. I can't even say it properly. Hopefully, Dave Lovegrove can help us with that. But it's basically, look, this was done in about on or about 1225, somewhere in that degree. Let's see. Here we go. Let's get Dave on there. Okay, so just accept it. It should have a pop-up on the Discord. Just accept that, and it'll bring you right up on stage. We fixed that, by the way, guys. So, yeah. Anyway, so again, about Snorri Sturluson, about 1225, and it's the first section of his Heimskringla. See, you have to bear with my old Icelandic here. Dave, are you there? Test 1, 2.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Okay. Good. Things are working. Welcome to the thing. Thanks for jumping through a couple of hoops. Okay, well, you guys know Dave Lovegrove, a good friend for a long time, and brilliant dude. Again, he's taught himself Old Icelandic, and he's reading the original sagas and kind of going through some of these things. And he pointed something out to me that I thought was incredible, which we'll get to in just a second. Dave, welcome to the thing. How you feeling? Good afternoon, and welcome to Troubled Minds. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks, Mike, and thanks for everybody listening. I love Australia so much, but I was just saying Damn Australia. Because the reason I couldn't put my hand up is because our stupid government's come up with all these child protection rules, and it seems to have done something to Discord. And I just could not work out what was going on. And finally, I found this little thing saying, "Oh, you've got to verify your age and who you are." And I think it's just an Australian thing, but
I think
you never had that problem before.
that's terrible. I think it's coming to the world everywhere because, hey, us watching everybody is good for the kids, right? I mean, anyway, that's a whole conversation for another time.
Yeah.
Glad we got you in here though, because like I said, you pointed out something incredible to me in this, again, this saga written by, or his group of sagas written by Snorri Sturluson back in about 1225. Now, we're talking wizards tonight, and I'm not sure if did you bring the actual passage? Were you going to read that? Because if not, I could read it. I got the thing that you sent me, which I can read it from. But if you've got it prepared, I'd rather have you read it because you'll pronounce things properly. But there's this amazing passage in the beginning of this. It's chapter 6, chapter 7, and I've linked it in the description down below. You guys can check that out. I encourage you to read these things in full if you're interested. But it's talking about, as David Lovegrove, the name of his book and the name of his YouTube channel, Viking Superpowers, and how Odin was sort of this maybe supernatural priest that brought in all these amazing powers like a wizard or something, and then taught this priesthood that spread it all over Scandinavia. So anything on that? Anything to add to that? And if you want to read this, cool. If not, I've definitely got it up and I can read this in just a moment here. Welcome to Troubled Minds, my man.
Oh, thanks, mate. Well, I've got it here in English and in Norse. Can I read it in Norse first and then read it in English?
Sure. Sure. Let's do that. Yeah, these are pretty short. Yeah, go right ahead. Love to hear it.
Yeah. Far also in komma Norðurland med honum dyr það sagt með sannindum að þær hofu kendu íþróttir þær men hafa lengi síðan með farit. Right, so that was my dramatic Old Norse god voice.
Very nice.
And did you hear that okay?
Yep, came through loud and clear. I just stay close to the mic because if you pull off the mic a little bit, the noise thing kind of whacks it down and it cuts. But we heard like 98.5% of that. Just stay close to the mic.
Oh, good. Well, I've actually got my headphones on, so maybe I turn my head slightly.
Perfect. Go right ahead.
Anyway, the English, what that means in English is when Odin of the Æsir came to the northern lands and the gods with him, it actually says DR, which is not exactly gods, very powerful ones. When the gods, these powerful ones came with Odin to the northern lands, it is truthfully said that they originated and taught those skills that people went on practicing long afterwards. So these are the skills, íþróttir they call them, but it means paranormal powers. It means what people sometimes call magic. I don't like that word too much because I feel it's a bit Christian. It's a bit sort of anti-pagan weirdness, but I think of it more as paranormal powers, natural powers that people in the ancient times developed and which were suppressed later. For the purposes of ruling and controlling.
Yeah, absolutely. And magic spells. I mean, magically, you said the term is a little bit loaded there, but I think I was reading some translations. I'm not the expert here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of boiled these ideas down to spells, like actual direct magic spells. Am I right?
Yes. The reason why I'm so into translating from the Old Norse to English is because translators filter what they're reading through their own lens, and traditionally this field has been a very academic field and very Christian, very filtered through Christian theology. So, and also fairy tales. So the terms that they use, like spells, there's always a sort of a negative vibe to it, same as the word witches. So I try to avoid those words because I don't think that Snorri Sturluson, when he wrote this, was saying these were evil powers. He was just saying, this is what we believe. This is why we're so into these people, because they had these outrageous abilities. And it says clearly there that they originated and taught those skills that people went on practicing long afterwards. And in the Norse, the feeling is that Snorri is saying in 1225, as you said, that they were still practicing secretly. It was forbidden, but I do believe he was a believer. He wasn't a Christian at all, and that people were secretly in Iceland and other places, especially Sweden, still practicing these arts.
Yeah, as I was reading through some of this as well, it doesn't end there. So let's begin. So I'm going to read this one more time. So when Odin of the Æsir came to the northern lands and the gods with him, it is truthfully said that they originated and taught those skills that people went on practicing long afterwards. And we're talking about magic spells, actual direct magic spells that do different things. And one of the things that Odin is most famous for is the shape-shifting. Like he was able to take on forms of animals and other things, which is incredible. And it is one of these spells. So if they were practicing, in the early 1200s, this type of stuff in secret, or at least trying to do this through ritual magic or the old ways that came from Odin himself, that seems like a wild thing indeed. There's more of this. Do you want to read the rest of this, or you want to kind of talk about this for a moment and then kind of crawl through it? What did you have in mind? Because there's a ton of ways we can do this. We can just blow through the whole thing, chapter 6 and chapter 7, and then kind of come back to each part, or I don't know, anything on what I just said there. And go ahead.
Chapter 6 and 7 are the most important. There's some really important stuff in an earlier chapter I wanted to bring up about berserkers and about communication. And because my thing is about paleo contact as well as paranormal abilities, there's this far out, I think it's a very, very high-tech connection with the original berserkers and with Odin, and how he sort of sent them berserk and how he protected them in battle and how he communicated with them. But to go further in this, you just said it perfectly. Chapter 7 elaborates on, more on the sort of things he could personally do. But in this chapter 6, we're told stuff that we would normally judge as being sort of, some of it seems sort of black and some's white, some's stuff that you could imagine using for good purposes. Others is a sort of battle magic. And like I said, I avoid the term. I'm not against people using the term magic, but I think it's in the same way as, all supernatural talk essentially farms out the power to gods or evil spirits or demons. They're the ones that do it. Whereas I think what they're saying here, and this is what I believe personally, these are human powers of connecting to the great reality, sort of quantum entanglement, connecting to the great reality. And the practices that they taught people, I don't think was going hocus pocus and having big cauldrons and sucking down mushies. I think it was actually meditational practices, shamanic type practices, singing, chanting, dancing, probably having sexual sort of orgies. All sorts of wild and wonderful creative stuff. But it states here in this chapter clearly that he was a craftsman of poems, and everything he was so beautiful to look at. People were just like Elvis Presley was in the house. And that's a telling thing to me with my paleo contact idea, because I do think that these guys were like the Nordics. They were exceptionally beautiful, fine specimens. And when the ordinary humans like us, the knuckle draggers, saw them, it was like, oh my God, they are so hot. And then, it says he spoke in poetry, but that would be tedious if he was like da 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 da.
Though you got
poetry's not like that.
You got to admit the ladies would love it. And so here's the thing too regarding this. When I was reading this, like I said, one of the things that really came into the aspect of casting spells and this magic, this sort of ancient magic that goes back to the dawn of the Norse here. Odin. I know you've got an issue with the term Allfather, but that's how most people know him. but he was certainly the high priest or the great wizard of this entire magical space. And like you said, magic's a loaded word, and it's hard to kind of talk about our own mythologies without these loaded words popping up. But the thing that stood out to me was the fact that it was so musical. Like everything seemed to be not like you would say abracadabra hocus pocus. It would be more like a jingle. You would sing this magical tune or melody, and that's what would cause the spell to happen, right? Like that's the thing that really stuck with me when I was reading through this. I thought it was pretty amazing.
Well, that's where the word spell is regained, because its sort of deepest meaning is like spell out, speak out. Spila is the Norse word for speaking, and it's still in Scottish. Well, yeah, spirinaboot means what are you talking about? Spieling. That's where spell comes from. So it's about power talk, and you hit the nail on the head when you said the ladies love it. Like all guys who've either failed with women or done okay know that when they're young, especially when they've had a few drinks, they're very susceptible to the right words. And if you say the wrong words, you sort of see ya. But if you keep saying the right words, they come under your spell. They sort of like, this guy's magical. And that's what poetry was to the Norse. It wasn't end rhyming. There was some of that later, but the early stuff was really creative. Like it was really magical in that it drew from the subconscious. It was like modern art. It was sort of hip. They'd say stuff that didn't quite make sense, but then it would resonate like good poetry does. You got the ballad, blah, 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 blah. There's nothing too magical. It's just a story. But when you get to real poetry, then there's something about it. It resonates. And that's what I think. He was totally in that mind all the time. So everything he said was inspired. Everything he did was inspired. And chanting and singing. The old Norse poets didn't just stand in the hall with all the drunken Vikings and go blah, 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 blah. I think they sung it, and they probably sung amazingly. Like, we don't know what it sounded like, but they had instruments, and they were probably, they had their own Jimi Hendrix characters on those early instruments, and they probably had amazing voices. And yeah, it was a very powerful scene. And what the story is saying is that these dudes who came from Ulsaland, from Asgard down in the south, they brought this outrageous culture and gave it to us. And, we learned from them, and then we learned how to turn these things into magic,
Yeah, totally.
Change the world, affect the world.
Yeah, which reminds me a little bit of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, because supposedly those were older tales that were sung. They were meant to be spoken aloud. They were that actual spoken word that came from that primordial dawn of storytelling that he finally got around to just writing down, which, I mean, those are massive songs to be singing, but that's how these things were passed on pre the fact that people could write in such tight circles, sort of the priest class or whatever, and people couldn't read it anyway for a very, very long time. And so the way this stuff was passed was through that sort of vocalization aspect of it anyway. So I do wonder if, and it's a good question to ask, I'll just ask you straight up, when Snorri wrote these, is there any element of that to the way he wrote it, or was it more of a direct sort of retelling of what he'd heard? Because meaning the question, let me clarify the question. Does it seem musical at all when you go back to the Old Norse and actually read this? Do you think that's what he was going for when he kind of put these ideas down?
That's an excellent question, because he was one of the first educated Icelanders in the Latinized written culture, but he was educated in both. And this is where people get tripped up and they think he was a priest because he went to a church university sort of thing in Iceland. But the churches back then weren't like the churches now. They were Christian in name, but mostly they were pretty much living the old Viking sort of way of life and feasting and partying and working hard as farmers. So they still love the old tales. And the thing about the old tales, we mostly have them from poetry, and even the most staid scholars will say, well, yeah, this poetry must be older than the Christian times because it's right. It follows the right meter. There's all these elaborate types of poetry that have to follow these rules, and they also have to use so-called mythology as what they call kennings. Have you heard of that? What a kenning is?
Not that term, no. What does it mean?
Well, once again, it's a word we use in Scottish. Do you ken what I'm spitting about? That's what I said before. That ken means to know. Do you know what I'm talking about? So it's like, do you know what I'm spelling about? It means to... Well, the classic everyone sort of knows is the Wales Road. You know, they travelled the Wales Road. So obviously Wales don't make roads, but the road the whale travels on is through the sea. So a poet says, you know, the king travelled the Wales Road to Iceland and he went across the sea. And the old poetry is full of that stuff, but it's much more complicated than that. And Snorri sort of wrote a lot of these stories partly to help anyone who wanted to know the old way because it was being forgotten. He elaborates all this sort of really deep, in-depth, ancient poetic knowledge, which was all, as far as we know, oral. So it wasn't written. People just had fantastic memories and they passed it on, probably father to son, or you know, just gifted people in the community, right, kid? I think you've got the gift to be a skald, which is a word for the poet. You're going to come with me, you know? I'll feed you and look after you, but you've got to memorize these ancient poems and not stuff them up. So, yeah, that's what poetry was. And Snorri puts as much poetry as he can into his Edda and also in Heimskringla. We're reading from Heimskringla today, and the Edda, his Eddas, they call it Snorri's Edda, or the prose Edda, which he wrote, which is full of poetry, and he explains the poetry and he tells us extra stories. And there's a book of even older poetry called the Elder Edda or the Poetic Edda. That's an anonymous book, but Snorri might have had something to do with getting it together, but that's, you know, they saved the really old stuff, but it was considered so dangerous that they hid it until the late 1600s when an Icelandic family finally trusted the church enough that they wouldn't destroy it. Yeah, we got this thing we've kept for 400 years. It's our really, really old ancestral stories. So
yeah, not only destroy it, but burn them at the stake for owning it. Like that's how horrific things were in that time. Terrible. We got about a minute left, and then we're going to take a break. We are taking your calls tonight, guys. We're here with Dave Lovegrove. You know him, you love him, of Viking Superpowers. Not just talking about paleo contact, but the idea tonight, and the question for you guys is very simple. Do you think it's possible that there were, I don't know, these ascended masters, we've talked about them in the past, that actually were able to, through, let's say, some sort of meditative process or something to that degree. Look, it doesn't have to be the shrooms or the this or the that's. It doesn't even have to be technology. It could be maybe a forgotten way of us to access our higher selves and things that we can or cannot do today anymore until we relearn it again. So do you think it's possible? Basically, I'm calling this tonight Wizards of the North, and of course, Norse sorcery as imported technology. But the technology itself doesn't have to be as such. Like I said, it could be something as simple as Wim Hof and the breathing techniques of how you can kind of make yourself a superhuman just by treating your body in a particular way. Once again, here with Dave Lovegrove, going to get right back with him. And we're going to read some more of this from this, the actual Snorri Sturluson, which is incredible, back to 1225 when this is written. And I agree with David. He says that he believes that Snorri was actually a sort of a pocket heretic. He believed in the old gods, which was not allowed during the time. And I think that's an incredible take on this. And why would you write all that down if you didn't? Great stuff. Appreciate it very much. If you want to be part of the conversation, 702-857-6939. Click the Discord link at troubledminds.org. One more time, 702-857-6939. Be right back. More with David Lovegrove, and we're taking your calls as well. If you got a question for David on this, anything you want to know about the Old Norse stuff, the old sagas, he's the expert. You pop on in here and ask him a question. Be right back. More Troubled Minds on the way. I'm Michael Strange. We'll see you in just one moment. Do not go anywhere.
You're tuning into Troubled Minds, the show where mystery knows no bounds. Stay tuned for revelations that'll keep you questioning the fabric of reality.
He came from the east with a wound where his eye had been. Spoke so smooth that the lie became the truth again. Taught the priests how to sing until the ground gave way. Wrote it down in the blood of every shortened day. They called it magic, called it madness, called it shame. But the ones who learned the songs were never quite the same. Something older than the gods, something colder than the sea, passed from hand to hand to hand. Now it's looking back at me. His body slept like the dead, while the hawk climbed high. Flew across frozen countries with a borrowed eye. Two blackbirds on his shoulders, bringing back the news. Every secret has a price, and every gift a bruise. They called it magic, called it madness, called it shame. But the ones who learned the songs were never quite the same. Something older than the gods, something colder than the sea, passed from hand to hand to hand. Now it's looking back at me. In a monastery in Iceland, a man writes it all down. Every weapon, every whisper, every way to leave the ground. Says the church burned the
Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting, and of course, 88.4 FM Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight, Wizards of the North, I'm calling this. Norse sorcery as imported technology. We're here with David Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers, a dear friend. And not only that, he's a brilliant guy looking at the Old Norse sagas in their old Icelandic and trying to translate them kind of outside of the dogma cycles of today, which I think is very important when you're looking at this stuff, when you're kind of peeling back the layers of old folklore and old stories. Maybe there's something more to it, because recognize how that one simple translation can change it to really represent and reflect a particular idea, and just by changing a word or two. And we did great examples of that the past couple of shows we had, not recently, but the first time we had Dave Lovegrove on, he was reading some of this stuff and pointing out that some of these translations are just not accurate. So what does this look like? And we're talking, of course, Odin and the powers that he had as maybe one of those amazing wizards or one of those ascended masters we always talk about. And maybe, dare I suggest, a real person? I don't know. Am I going too far there? Dave Lovegrove, welcome back. You're on Troubled Minds. Thanks for being patient and chilling through the break. I don't know. What do you think? Is it too much to suggest that maybe Odin was a real person who had amazing powers that he was able to share to sort of a larger priesthood? What do you think about that idea?
I absolutely think he was a real person, and I think all those Æsir were real. It's a big subject, but Snorri Sturluson's side of the story is like 2/3 of what we know, yet he's been quietly demonized over the years as making up stuff, as euhemerizing, which is a sort of I think a Greek came up with that idea, but it's a way of explaining the fact that people read this and go, this guy seems to believe these people are real. This is not just gods flying around with wings on their back. And so they say, this is a euhemeristic approach to writing history, meaning they sort of deify ordinary men, kings, and then later people just make up extra powers for them and say, they were like amazing, super powerful. Whereas I start my book with a chapter called, I Believe, Snorri, where I passionately put my case that he wasn't a Christian, that this is not euhemerism. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I believe to the best of his ability, he wanted to put down the old stories with truth that he'd learned, not only as from his education, but he spent 2 years in Scandinavia researching. Like he was a nobleman. He was related to kings. He went to all these places, and he would have talked to the guys who were sneakily keeping the old religion going, and got the goss, and found out from the horse's mouth what these guys were still remembering. And he knew up in the frozen wasteland of Iceland, he had a far better chance of preserving it from the wrath of the persecutors, because it's just a forgotten place and much easier to resist up there where everyone's very related and mates, So, yeah, it's a long way of saying yes, absolutely. I think he's real, and I do think in a way they're still here. I think they're related to the UFO phenomena. And I don't want to sidetrack the conversation by going too far into why I think they're still here, but I do feel like they have actually communicated to me once or twice and said, Dave, you're onto it, man. This is a great thing. We'll help you with this. I've got a particular little Raven story, which I might have told you. Did I tell you the Raven story?
Not that I recall, but my so much flows through my brain. It's possible you told me it has been washed out now by all the other crazy ideas that flow through. And I'm talking about myself, not you. You're certainly not crazy.
Yeah.
But regarding the Raven story, real quick too. Why is that important here? Because many people know about the ravens of Odin, but what were they? He had 2 ravens. He taught them how to speak, and they spoke fluent whatever languages he was speaking. And what were they? What were they as sort of the aspect to him? And then I'd love to hear your Raven tale, just to kind of fill in a couple gaps here for the people that don't know.
Yeah, well, Hugin and Munin, they were called, means thought and memory. And they were said to go out every day and fly around the world and bring back intelligence to Odin. And this is the thing about this whole project, that for me it's both super technology and spirituality. So it's not just one or the other. It's a sort of a quantum leap in consciousness to a technology that is both material and not material. I know you can follow me. It's
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's where we're going. And I think that's who these advanced people were. They weren't just rocketeers. They also were, wizards. And, the Ravens, I also think that they're, in the way that Odin could become different creatures, I think that they still can talk to people through creatures, okay, like a shamanistic sort of thing. And I'm definitely a shaman sort of person. I've got lots of experiences. I won't bore you with them, but you know, I have been made into that person through all sorts of things in my life. But you know, I'm not here drumming on a little drum covered in paint or anything. But you know, I feel like that sort of person.
I feel like we should get you one. What's your favorite color? Let's get you a drum. That'd be amazing. Not to derail.
I am a trained Scottish drummer, and I love drumming, and I would love a shaman drum. That's something that I've got to get.
Okay.
The Irish got a barong, which is similar. It's the Irish barong, but could I tell you? It's very quick.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Now let's just so now that we framed it properly with the thought and memory, let's hear the Raven story. What happened?
Yeah, so when I was first researching for this about 2021, I think, I was staying in a hotel in Brisbane, which is the capital of Queensland, you know, a big state here, the Sunshine State in Australia. And it was a really very unusually cold morning. I was rugged right up, and I was sitting in this little kitchen of my room, and I was reading the Havamal, which is the words of Odin, the wisdom of Odin, right? So it's a really ancient poetry, but it's so cool. Like it's very, very interesting when you read that. You think, this Odin sounds like a real guy, you know, like this sounds like wisdom from a real man who's lived. So I'm reading it in Norse and translating it. I hear this great cawing of crows, like literally just behind me at the door. I was sitting beside the door, just really loud, two crows cawing. And I've never experienced that at any other time. They don't usually do that sort of close-up stuff. Made me jump. So I stood up, opened the door. I saw the crows fly off, and our crows here are a relative of the raven, big blackbirds, you know. They swooped off and went where I couldn't see them in a big tree, but then they just kept on going, quack, 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 you know. I thought, wow, that was really freaky. I'm reading this stuff by Odin, and it's like two of his ravens are at my door. And as I turned to walk into the room, I looked down at the footplate of the door, and there was a little golden plate with a picture of a raven, and it said Raven Brand. And I swear to God, I just went, oh, wow. Like, I don't know what the chances of that being, but it was one of those confirmations, like, yes, I was talking to you, you know. I'm Odin, and they were my ravens, and I just said, go, man, do it. And actually, if anyone has checked out my channel, I've got a little clip. I made a video in Iceland sitting by the sea at Reykjavik, and it's a beautiful blue sky behind me, and I'm reading this passage, and as I come to it, could have even been that passage we read before, but as I came to the part where it said, and Odin and the Æsir came to the north and taught their skills, this perfectly circular cloud just appears in the sky right above my head, and it's just a perfect ring, and there's a ring within the ring. And it looks for all the world like, you know, something caused by a invisible but hot flying saucer, you know. And I didn't see it. And when I got back to Australia and I was going through the videos, I went, oh, what? Like, and it just went from blue sky to this little cloud for a couple of seconds, and it was gone. And that again gave me shivers. I thought, that was Odin, you know. Him and his people are watching me.
Yeah, I'm not the cloud expert. Is it the lenticular cloud that looks like the UFOs? I'm not sure. However they term it scientifically. And I'm not discounting it. I think it's incredible that, and we've talked about this in the past as well on this show and others, that these synchronicity storms tend to happen in particular moments, and you kind of wonder if there is something greater sort of triggering ideas, or, you know, maybe when you're on the right path, like where this stuff comes from, it's leading you down.
Life is poetry.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And again, look, not one raven, not three. It was exactly two. Like, so I mean, it's like, I don't know. It kind of feels like a lot of things are lining up in the moment, and maybe you're onto something incredible here, which I think you are. Again, thanks for being so smart about all this stuff. And again, spending 50 years of your life literally learning this language. That's incredible. We'll get back to the actual text here in a second. Anything else to add about any of that? There's a lot there with synchronicities and whatnot, but we can get back to the text and kind of peel through some of this, because there's more here that I think is incredibly important as part of this conversation.
Yeah, well, I would just say, as I sort of said earlier, I think that there was, in these tales, some people will just see purely mythic gods and godlike characters and read it as a spiritual text showing a lost way of, you know, seeking the divine, like you said, the All-Father, you know, seeking connection to the divine. And I absolutely think that's there. I also absolutely think it's a record of very advanced people coming to the earth, interacting with humans, as so many tales all around the earth tell us. People came down from the stars, they taught us this and that, they hung with us for thousands of years, and then they went away. And I'm sure that these Norse tales are a mixture of those two things. They don't cancel each other out. And one of the really cool things that's happened to me is I was really quite scared that the true believers in the Norse gods, you know, people into True, which is the faith of the Æsir, they take it very seriously, you know, like they really do believe it, and they worship the gods, and some even do sacrifices. I hope they don't sacrifice people, but, you know, they sort of get into it. And I thought those people would hate me straight off, but so far I haven't received any hate. I've actually received a lot of Scandinavians who are really into this, writing and going, good on you, man, this is great, love what you're doing, this makes sense. I too have thought this, you know, people, I live up in the far north of Norway and I heard reindeers and I watch your channel and I think it's super cool. And people from Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, British, you know, Irish people, of course, my dear American cousins are very enthusiastic, and Canadians.
Hey, even us Yankees, you can't count us out. We're bringing up the rear here, but we do love this stuff too. And look, you know me, I live in Las Vegas. There's tons of like amazing, like old, carvings on caves around here. There's Area 51 right up the way. Like I live in a weird central, so there's weird stuff in the sky out here all the time. So you were definitely talking to the right guy. Okay, so let's get back to this text too, because I think, like I said, there's so much here that we didn't really touch yet, and it's incredible when you think about Odin casting spells. Okay, but then beyond that, actually teaching them to a larger group of, you know, these high priests, which then spread them out through the countryside, and then, you know, this type of thing. Do you want to read it? You want me to read it? I got it right here, so you don't got to pull it up if you want me to do it.
Well, no, you read the section you'd like to talk about. There's one bit I'd like to talk about, but you read that one. And
okay, so I'm just going to go straight, because we'll get through all this because it's very short. It's only chapter 6 and chapter 7. These links are in the description down below, so I encourage you guys to read this, go to the source material, read the translations, and then let's hear what David has to say about this. But here we go. So Odin was superior to them all about the skills that people went on practicing, okay? He was superior to them all, and from him they learned all skills because he knew them all first, and yet more. But there is this to be said about why he was so very exalted. There were these reasons for it. He was so fair and noble in countenance. When he was sitting amongst his friends, that it rejoiced the hearts of all. But when he went to battle, he appeared ferocious to his enemies. And the reason was that he had the faculty of changing complexion and form in whatever manner he chose. Let's leave it there and talk about that. Now, that's, like I said, probably one of the more famous things that people would know about Odin in a cursory manner, you know, without digging into these tales and being a weirdo like me and a weirdo like you. They reads this stuff and kind of points these things out and goes, wait a minute now, what does that mean? Is this actually saying that he was a shape changer, a shape shifter? Could he become the crows, like a thought and memory, or a wolf running through the countryside? What exactly does this mean, and what is your interpretation?
Yeah, well, literally, like going into a trance and leaving your body and traveling as a creature is a well-known ancient shamanic practice right through the north, and Finland and the Sami people, which we used to call the Lapps. All this is part of their culture, and I've got quite a few of them who write to me to tell the truth. They like what I'm doing too, but there is also a thing where he could. I do think he could change shape and appear ferocious to his enemies. It's either going to be the way he affects their minds so that they see stuff. You know what I mean? Like I've had this conversation with my professor friend in Iceland, Ardaman Jakobsson. Professor of Old Norse at the Icelandic University. We've talked about shape shifting quite a bit, and he said to me, "What do you think? Do you think they were saying?" And this is in other sagas, not just in Heimskringla. He said, "Do you think they actually changed, or just people perceived them as changing, turning into something?" And I think that he had the ability to affect everybody around him like a hypnotist can do. And I do think hypnotism is part of this. It's that control of the mind of others, control of your own mind. This story is relevant, so I'll tell it briefly. But I worked as a bouncer back in the 90s at a very popular beachside hotel, and this big group of young people were they told me they were going to trample me if I didn't get out of the way, because they were dying to get into the nightclub. But I had to say, no, we've got too many people. I'll let people in as people come out. And this one young guy just insisted. He said, "No, man, you don't understand. If you don't get out of the way, we're just going to trample you." And I looked at the ground and something happened. And the only thing I can explain it as if every terrible thing that I've experienced and read about in my whole life was suddenly concentrated into a little black spot. And I felt that I felt like I turned into a wolf, right? I literally felt wolfness. And I felt like my eyes had fire in them. It's like they're the devil or something. But I felt I turned into this wolf, and not to overstate this, but I looked up at him in the crowd, and I said in a really quiet voice, it was like something took me over, and I said, "Am I allowed to say a rude word?"
Yes, keep it as no F-bombs, please. But yeah,
it's mild.
Okay,
no,
you go ahead.
I said really quietly, "You are starting to shit me." But the words came out, but what was coming out of my eyes, man, I tell you, it's like Nietzsche said, when you look into the abyss looks back into you. And I'd looked into the abyss for years in, jobs I'd done and whatever. And the abyss looked out, and I saw this guy just go absolutely white and start, with all his strength, pushing back against the people behind him. And I saw all the faces dropped, like with fear. And then I said to them, "Now, if you'll just wait, I'll let you in." And this guy's going, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir." But I would love to know what he saw. But a couple of weeks later, there was a couple of young guys talking at a distance. They thought I couldn't hear them. One said, "That bouncer, they call him the smiling bouncer, that a couple of weeks ago, this crowd was going to sort of go over the top of him. And the look he gave these people," he said, "if looks could kill, they would have all been dead on the spot. Just boom, just dropped dead." So I think it's the only time in my life I think I did shape change in that way, that I didn't feel like I turned into a wolf, but somehow this really dangerous ancient vibe came out of me, and they just submitted instantly. It was like, no,
yeah,
not dealing with this guy.
Yeah, like sort of embodied. Yeah, go ahead and finish. I'm sorry.
Oh, they didn't expect it because I was known as the smiling bouncer, and they, in their lack of wisdom, took that as a sign that I wasn't much of a threat. But it just came out of me. And that's what I think it's talking about here with Odin, that he was a master of all these things, all these powers that some of us touch on in our lives and think, wow, I wonder what that's about, and maybe only experienced once or twice. But I think him and the people he trained could switch this stuff on at will. And that's why they were considered gods, because it wasn't that they were immortal or that they could personally fly without a machine or something. I think that just they were so far out, so powerful.
Yeah, well said, all that. So it was more embodying the archetype, the energy of this wolf. Like, I mean, I think many of us here would probably go, yeah, you probably didn't turn into a wolf, obviously, but there was something in your demeanor, something in your posture, something in your body language that basically was kind of like Gandalf in that moment with the Balrog. I'm not sure if you've seen the movies, but you shall not pass.
Yeah.
And the second you do that and you sort of make a declaration, you don't need words. And shout out the unseen Steve McQueen in the chat says, speech is the only spell. And, for the most part, I kind of agree with that sentiment. But in this case, Dave was able to kind of do it without saying anything. It was his posture. It was his demeanor. It was the fact that...
I did say a spell.
Oh, that's right. You did.
My spell was,
that's right.
Starting to shit.
That's right. So, that's right.
It's such an understatement, I think like you are starting to shit me, and they're just terrified of me, and they're thinking, Jesus, I know what I'm really shitting.
Yeah, exactly.
Like pulling their arms and legs off.
Yeah, they're like, no, we're actually shitting ourselves. That's what I mean, though. So even without that, like maybe that was it. Maybe it was a verbal incantation that kind of evoked that fear space of your posture. I mean, because you were just like, you're like, look, I'm not kidding, and I'm done talking about it. And the second you do that, like there are trolls out there. Like, the world knows that the internet has proven there's just trolls, that the bad faith actors, I call them. These people that just want to kind of, FAFO, as they say. And so if you fudge around, eventually you will FO find out. And this becomes part of that issue. And where it's like, you can go pull pranks on people at the mall for YouTube clicks or something, but eventually somebody's not going to be in the mood and they're going to knock you out. Like, that's the type of like energy that kind of comes out of this. I love it very much. And so that's why I want to point this out, because it is one of the things that comes to mind when I think of Odin himself, not just the crows, of course, thought and memory, which is incredible. It's like a surveillance state. It's like an old school surveillance state where they're able to kind of gather data and information about the lands around him and bring it to him on a daily basis. And he's just kind of like living in a technological space that other people can't not fathom just yet. And whether you want to call that magic or you want to call that sort of an early technology, that's up to you. Like I said, let the listener decide on these things. I think it's incredibly important to make those distinctions yourself, because we all have our own, as I like to call them, dogma cycles. But fire stuff. We're here with David Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers tonight, and we're talking. I'm calling this Wizards of the North because, yeah, that's exactly what this is. Norse sorcery as imported technology. What do you know about this? Did you know all that what can I get the guy Odin? I was about to say something else. That Odin could do cast all these spells, and there's more. We're going to read more of this because he could do a ton of things, which I didn't know either until I read this. Dave sent it to me a couple of days ago, and I was like, hell yeah, this is fire. What is going on? How come nobody ever talks about this? Love to hear your thoughts. We got some calls coming up. Quantum Karma, if you've had your hand up, I know you were helping us test when we started. If you want to call in, you were first. Let me know. If not, drop your hand, because I know we were testing when you put your hand up. If not, we'll go to Jen when we come back. And you guys tell me. Well, that'll determine the order. We're here with Dave, like I said, hanging out, just doing troubled mind stuff. Like, that's what this is about, kind of looking at the world in a different way, considering what the old stories mean in the new space of ideas. I don't know. Answers from me, few. Questions, many. And I think it's important to recognize that maybe some of this stuff could be more strange than you ever dreamed. Love to hear your thoughts. 702-857-6939. One more time, we're here with Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers. Please check out all his stuff. Buy his book. Links are in the description down below. Be right back. More on the way. Don't go anywhere. Quantum Karma, you're up. Unless you put your hand down, then we'll go to Jen in Missouri. And more with Dave. Don't go anywhere. More Troubled Minds on the way.
This is Troubled Minds. Your host, Michael Strange, the master of the mysterious, is here to guide you through the shadows of the unexplained.
Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting. And, of course, 88.4 FM Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight, we're taking your calls with David Lovegrove tonight of Viking Superpowers as we talk about Odin. Not just that Odin, yes, that Odin, but also looking into the old sagas written by Snorri Sturluson. There's an interesting couple chapters, Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. I will link these in the description down below. I encourage you to read them in full, where it talks about actual Odin casting spells directly, but not just directly. Let's say if he was some sort of, deity or something, as many have projected him to be in these Norse sagas and beyond, sort of the mythologies that came out of it. But it says that he taught these spells to sort of this group of high priests who then went on and taught these spells to more common people as well. It wasn't as tightly kept as you would expect. And maybe even in the time of Snorri Sturluson that there were people practicing this sort of ritual magic behind the scenes because they were scared of being burned at the stake by, well, who was burning people at the stake in about that time. So, and again, not to be contentious here, but I don't know. So what do you think? As usual, look, I can see the world in a ton of different ways. In this particular aspect, when I read the actual translations of the saga here, it makes me go, wait, there's a ton of stuff here that my Dungeons and Dragons mind goes, yeah, I love all of this. But you're in for a treat because not only are we talking about this, we've got the expert here, David Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers. Welcome back, brother. Thanks for hanging out and being patient through the breaks. You're on Troubled Minds. Anything to add to that? We'll get into the rest of these spells because I think it's incredibly important here as part of the conversation. But anything on your mind on that? And then we'll go to Jen on the phone, and then we'll get into more of the spells of Odin of old.
Yeah, well, I totally dig what you're saying. And earlier you mentioned that this is not just about distant spells, but things that are practical in your life, things that are happening right now. And it could be as simple as predicting the weather and knowing, take the clothes in before they get wet and all those sort of things. But I'm a Kung Fu exponent, and one of my greatest masters labeled me a master. It's not really very humble to call yourself a master, but he said to me, Dave, you should call yourself a master. You've really got it. And I've been doing it for 30 years, but it's a mind art, and very much what I would imagine these guys knew about, because it's like a human thing that crosses time and culture. And I've discovered that there's an ancient Viking wrestling art called Glima, which I'm just getting to know more about now. But apparently, as I read about it, I thought, this is just like my Kung Fu. This is in Iceland from Scandinavia, but the principles they're talking about here are exactly what the Chinese masters taught me that came from ancient China. And so, there's these all these arts, poetry, obviously, painting, carving, making ships. The Viking ships are just like surfboards. They're not works of just thinking; they're works of inspiration. So that's my little bit.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Go ahead, finish.
What I'd like to briefly talk about next is in the end of chapter 6. It talks about the berserkers and how Odin affected people in battle, and also how his men were. And there's a previous chapter, I think it's chapter 3, which I wanted to skip back to and just show you what it says about how they became berserkers, because people are always, I wonder if they just took magic mushrooms and went into berserk fury. And I'm not saying I ever took mushrooms. I'm a very straight guy. But back in the 70s, I knew some guys who took magic mushrooms, and there was no sort of urge to kill or anything happening there.
They were not berserkers at all.
Yeah, like this connection with drugs and berserkers is like, really? Maybe Scots whiskey or something.
That's funny. I mean, I could imagine what's the guy's name, Conor McGregor, on like a bottle of whiskey. That'd be a scary dude. But you put him on some mushrooms, and maybe not. You're like you put a blanket on him and put him to bed. So I mean,
a lava lamp, you know.
Exactly. So we remind me to get back to that point, because I want to talk about how they became those berserkers. Because so we're talking chapter 6 and 7 of this, and this is again from Snorri Sturluson. I always have to look to get it right, or I'm going to say Snorri Nerdluson or something. In 1225, and he wrote this stuff again from that oral tradition. Okay, so he was in the space. He was kind of collecting ideas and the old sagas, and he put them down to paper. Okay, and this is the important part, is that some of the stuff that we're reading tonight is direct translations. And again, you know, David here has some alternate translations, which we've talked about, and we can kind of clarify as we go. But it's talking about Odin casting spells. And we left off with him actually having the faculty of changing complexion and form in whatever manner he chose. So we'll get back to that. It's bookmarked. We'll get back to that in a moment, but we are taking your calls if you want to be part of the conversation. 702-857-6939. Click the Discord link at troubledminds.org. We'll put you on the show. Just like that. Thanks for being patient. Jen in Missouri, you're on Troubled Minds. How are you with Mike and Dave? What's on your mind? Go right ahead.
Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear. You sound great.
Good. Okay. How are you guys doing?
Very good.
Good, Jen.
Very good, thank you. And you? Hope you were well. And take it wherever you like. As you know, we're an open bunch here. We'd like to hear ideas.
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is I love talking about all of these, you know, old beliefs and everything, of course. And then, you know, so the historical points about the timelines and everything have always really interested me. In particular, like, it's true that with, you know, the influx of Christianity, when it came into Europe and it came into the European countries, the amount of forced baptisms and by capital, you know, in some cases, to be paid for with death, if you wouldn't be baptized. Like among the Saxons, I remember reading about that I think it was under Charlemagne that if you weren't baptized, it was like, you know, the price was death, basically. And so that's really fascinating, just how horrific it really was in a lot of, you know, now that was like in the 700s, I think 749 or something like that, 80. But you have to consider too that, like, with Christianity, and in particular, I would say that Christianity coming into Europe, you know, in particular, how it, like all of these European nations in Germania and amongst the Britons and the Saxons and the Celts, there was no book yet. And so in the earlier, for 1500 years, there was no Bible in Christian Europe. So with this forced conversions and everything that came in the 700s, in that timeline, it had already been heard there. But in addition to that, it had been 1,500 years without any text, without any book. And many of the priests that came to that region with Christianity could not read and had never even read the Bible, which I thought was really fascinating. And it's only been 500 years where Christianity has been linked with the Bible, with the book. So that's really fascinating in my mind. But just looking at the sort of with the pagan belief systems, as we think of them, versus the monotheistic belief systems, you know, you think about things like animism. And one thing that's really interesting with the concept of the gods, like you have gods that are almost like the boss of, for example, if you were to say thunder or lightning or storms or anything, water, like the oceans or anything like that. The gods are presented, and this is coming out of Rome, which is influenced a lot by, you know, other belief systems out of Phoenicia, out of Greece. But their whole mixture of idea was that they put this idea that God would be sort of in control of something, of a natural element, versus the idea that the natural elements themselves, you could give it a name if you wanted to, but they were being expressed like the god was that. Like, it wasn't like the idea that, for example, even this is in a lot of the, pretty much all of the pagan belief systems, but it's really fascinating, though, and a huge difference. Think of a lord of storms, like that I rule over storms. I can bring storms up whenever I want, that kind of idea. I'm a boss of storms, versus that it is the storm. Like, it literally is. Or like the idea of, basically any of that idea. Any time that there's some kind of boss over resources, I always wonder where that belief system is coming from. And that versus, for example, with the Norse belief systems, or the Celtic belief systems, or the Brighton belief systems, or if you go to the Lakota or the Cherokee and the Americas, or if you go to Japan to the Shinto, or around the world, but the concept of the actual element in nature is like, it is the actual force. The god is the storm, not some kind of boss of storms, that can do whatever it wants to. And the whole idea too, of these independent spirits amongst all of these, they're just, it's not even necessarily polytheism, even, not quite. It's the idea of, I don't know, it's something that I've just, barely studied or been interested in, or even just not even studied it, just thought about mostly, about how much more sense it makes for these earlier belief systems, that it was the embodiment of, it was the expression of that unique force, and not something like that's where I think a lot of the, that's a huge difference. And how convenient, though, too, with these boss gods, and that came along in Rome and things like that, and in a lot of belief systems where they rule over, and that makes it permissible then to take resources, because at that point you could say that, and gods that travel, because you could believe with, like, for example, some of these belief systems, like a thunder god, a thunder lord, like something that creates thunder, say, in the state of Utah, is a different thunder lord than one up in Maine, because those are entirely different environments. Or a thunder lord, say, like over in, England, these are entirely different types of spirits, unique, and there's nothing ruling over them specifically. And that kind of worldview has just always been really fascinating. So I love thinking about these ideas, because it's so much, it's very unique, looking at the pagan belief systems and how they were built around timekeeping too was really a big deal. I thought was interesting, like the wheel and everything, about the way that they divided. Have you heard of the 5-year cycles? Like it's called the calendar of Colgany or something like that they found. It was like out of Ireland or France, but it was Latinized, so it had been touched, but it did include like the 5-year cycles, because they would break things down to like a day, and then so many months, and so on and so forth. But all of that perimeter circle type of artwork and everything, all of it was trying to explain the way that they kept time. I think that's what it appears to be, but it's just, I don't know, it's neat.
I dig it. Dave, go ahead, take that anywhere you like. You're the best, Jen. Hang tight. Let's hear what Dave has to say.
Sure, I'm on mute.
Well, that was super interesting, Jen, and you're really well read, and you've put a lot of thought into it. That's really cool. You covered a lot of territory there, but I was just thinking about Carlos Castaneda and his experiences with the old Indian shaman They call him the sorcerer in the book, but Don Juan, have you ever come across that?
I have. It's controversial.
Yeah.
I've read all.
Yeah, I had a feeling you would have read them. You read all of them. Wow.
I have, yeah.
I know they're controversial, and I know there's all sorts of weird stories about Carlos Castaneda and his women. It's just one of those things you think, oh, really, man? Did you have to go there? Yeah.
We have to be honest.
But I was a sort of a hippie in the 70s. I was a surfer, but I was really, where I live in Australia is, we had sort of Australia's Woodstock, which was called the Aquarius Festival in 1972, and that place, Nimbin, became an epicenter for people to drop out of university and daily life and go and build a shack somewhere in a forest and live there, and so there was a whole intellectual scene that went with that, and Carlos Castaneda and the teachings of Don Juan was very popular, the first book especially, because it was all about taking drugs, especially peyote, and it sort of justified living a life where you're just a stone from morning till night. In some people's heads, they thought, well, yeah, this is obviously the way to get to enlightenment. But I never read them in those days. But in the 80s, I met this cool young guy who was really very sharp in the mind, a person like you, really, somebody who's very widely read. And he said, have you ever read Journey to Ixtlan? And you'd know this one. And he said because I said to him, back in the 70s, I like to have a puff, but I always wanted to escape from that because I could see it wasn't, I wanted to find the clean way. I wanted to find the way into higher states without drugs. And he said, you got to read this book, Journey to Ixtlan, because there Don Juan takes Carlos Castaneda out and says nature is alive. And you remember? Do you know the book? Do you recollect it?
I do.
Yeah. Remember how the wind, like stuff would happen, and the old shaman would say, "Yeah, there, that's it. Doesn't like you," or he's going, "But it's just the wind." No, it's you fool. It's not the wind. It's it's alive. And you said earlier about animism, and that's something that most people brought up in the West for a long, long time don't really understand. They think it's just a superstitious, silly tribal belief. But in my life experience, I went from being super Christian in my early days to becoming pretty much an animist. And I totally agree with you. I think that the stories of the Norse gods are a compound of ancient understandings and beliefs like animism, to see consciousness in all things and see, sort of beings that seem to be in charge of particular areas, thunder or trees or the river or whatever. I think that's valid, actually, in the great consciousness that we live in. But the Snorri Sturluson literally says in the Edda that they kidnapped this very, very influential and powerful young wizard called Gylfi, and they took him and showed him Asgard, and I think they took him out into space, and they showed him the Earth from space, and they showed him all their technological wonders, and they also showed him their powers, and said, we want you to go back and tell everybody about us and all these stories we've told. So they put him back on the ground. He heads back to Sweden, tells everybody, and it says, people kept on telling these stories. But the crucial thing is, next thing, there's these so-called gods, and they get together and go, right, everybody, we're going to decide who gets to play which character in those stories we just told. So it's literally saying, they tell them all about Odin and Thor and Freya and all these great, powerful beings, and then you've got this thing at the end, which scholars have tried to say it's interpolation, but it's not. It's actually there in the original, that they got together and said, well, we're going to take over the North, We've primed this guy with stories about us based on these much more ancient understandings. And when we rock up, we're going to say, well, I'm Odin, this is Thor, this is Freya, this is Bragi, this is, Forseti, all the names, Loki. I think that's what actually happened. So they were sort of a Star Trek type group that weren't as moral, and they were like, yeah, no, we're going to interfere the hell out of these primitives. They weren't going to just leave them alone, but they manipulated their minds to think that they were, these powers that were known by the people. And probably, scholars do tend to say, Odin wasn't so big in Sweden. It seems Thor was bigger there, and Odin was big in Denmark and, in England. And that was something else you said I loved, when you gave that. I was really impressed that you knew about the Saxon Wars. Like, hardly anyone knows about that.
Jen's on the game. Jen's definitely on the game. We're running out of time, Jen is on the game. She is on the game. Been on the game forever. Give me just a minute to kind of wind this down. So we got a couple minutes left between you two. But Jen, thoughts on that? We'll go back to Dave and then help me wind this down. Appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. Let me look at the time. So with the Saxons, which is a little different, more in Germania region and everything, but very closely linked to all these belief systems of those pagan systems at the time. In 749 AD, thereabouts, with Christianity under Charlemagne, the massacre of Verdun, after
terrible.
Charlemagne's army and the Franks had come through, and they had destroyed there were these pillars. There was a great oak tree, and then there was this other pillar, apparently, that had been also somehow, I don't know how, but they had actually taken it down. It was like a petrified tree that they believed held up the sky. And they managed to... Thank you, yes. And they had managed to bring it down. And after that, there was several different wars that occurred. There was a great drought they spoke of in the lore. But in addition to that, the massacre of Verdun, those armies that came through told them all, okay, all right, basically there's a surrender. And then killed 4,500 men of farmers, peasants, boys that surrendered thinking they were going to get mercy, and they didn't.
Yeah, all in one day.
All in one day. Yeah. On the side of this sacred river of these systems of belief. And what's distinctive in this is that it's not the idea that God is in everything. It's the idea that everything has a spirit without that being a concept. The idea of this one God that rules over all of the essence of everything is that everything is the essence of what it is, unique to itself, and it's not all the expression of one God. It's very
different. It's not an old dude with a beard.
Yeah, it's a separate system. The spirit of a wolf is separate from a spirit of a tree. It's not the same being. It's not all the coming necessarily. It's an expression of it. And I don't know, that's really a unique idea amongst, in animism and in pantheism, how different that is. It's not just that there's an intelligence in everything. It's that intelligence is not related all back to one particular god. It's unique and fascinating among the pagan belief systems, included in the Norse pagan belief systems and the pre-Christian systems and the pre-Judaic religious systems.
You're the best, Jen.
In general.
The time ogre has arrived. Thanks for the call. Dave, go ahead and finish that. You were the best, Jen. Go give Jen a follow at the Arcane Observer. I'll tell you about it when we get back. Go ahead and you got your best 30 seconds, and I'll play some outro music.
Yeah, everything Jen said was stellar, and what she said about the book and how people didn't read, and even the priests usually were illiterate, and it was all catechisms. It was all about a structure of dominance and power. The religion was just a smokescreen. Yep. So,
which
it was spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen's amazing. Go give Jen a follow. Again, the Arcane Observer, troubledminds.org/friends. Scroll down. You'll find Jen there. It says follow Jennifer. We're here with David Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers tonight. We'll get back to that, the animism and stuff. It's incredibly important to this. But also, we're going to talk about the additional spells that Odin cast. Yeah, they were written down in 1225. You're right back. More Troubled Minds on the way. More with David Lovegrove and your calls as well. Don't go anywhere. More Troubled Minds on the way.
You're tuning into Troubled Minds, the show where mystery knows no bounds. Stay tuned for revelations that'll keep you questioning the fabric of reality.
Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting. And, of course, 88.4 FM Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight, we're here with David Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers. And we're talking about those spells that Odin used to cast. Do you know what they are? Yeah, that's right. You don't. You absolutely do not. Because if you do, you're a super, super, super nerd. Well, you're in luck because we've got the superest of nerds, the master nerd. There you go, Dave. I called you a master. I did it. I worked it in. You are a master. We're talking to Dave Lovegrove tonight about Odin and about the old sagas, not just in the original translations of Old Icelandic, but how they sort of really come into form into the modern space and the modern mind's eye. That's the point of this. That's why we get together and talk about these things. That's why we're lucky enough to have made all these amazing friends, Dave included. David Lovegrove, welcome back to Troubled Minds. What is up? Anything you want to touch on that Jen had there, because she had a ton of really great stuff, but we do have to get into that third chapter you described with the berserkers and the final spells of Odin. So we got some stuff to cover, but if you want to comment on that, I'd love to hear it. Welcome back, brother. How are you?
I'm great, mate. I just made myself a coffee, and what I loved about, Jen really taught us a lot. I was nodding furiously with most things she said, but it reminded me when I went to Iceland, I had the great honor, really, to have a private viewing of the original Edda written by Snorri Sturluson. So I didn't see the one he physically wrote in 1225, but I saw one from 1300, which was not too far away, But what impressed me was just not only the fact that the old professor who showed it to me said, these things, even in the day, would have cost a couple of mil to make in today's money. But it's like a huge herd of cattle to make one of these books. It's just the fact, it made me think, who read this, and only a few people ever read these, but they told everybody else the stories. And that's really how we got our religions for, thousands of years, actually. It was just the few elite who could read. And if they're honest, they'd tell you what it really said. If they weren't, they'd manipulate it to make them, sound good.
Yeah. And as we've recognized in the modern news space, the mass media is, as I always like to say, it's a trillion data points, and you can cherry pick anything you want. So if you can't read any of it, and I'm the one telling it to you, of course I'm going to give you the version that benefits me. I mean, like this, and this is history. This is, not literally, nearly literally all of history is that we had these, and that's why I like to call them dogma cycles, because you can't even, you can trace back some of this stuff to the texts, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff. I'm not going to get into that, but you can. But was that the message being sent from then to now? No, hell no, because most people couldn't read it all. Anyway, okay, let me read this, because let's get this in here, because I think this is super important. We'll get to the berserkers. We got James on the line. We'll go to him in a second too. But so I was talking about this. Now look, and the reason was that he had the faculty of changing complexion and form in whatever manner he chose. And we're talking Odin. Okay, this is a translation, not from David Lovegrove. This is the generic general translation. Okay. So take that with a grain of salt, as usual, when you read anything historically. And we're talking about Odin and the spells he cast. This continues. Another was that he spoke so eloquently and smoothly that everyone who heard thought that only what he said was true. Everything he said was in rhyme, like the way that is now called poetry is composed. He and his temple priests, this is where this gets weird, were called craftsmen of poems, for that art originated with them in the northern lands. Odin could bring it about in battle. His opponent, could bring it about that in battle his opponents were struck with blindness or deafness or panic. Very Dungeons and Dragons spells. Okay, he could cast a blind spell, a deafness spell, and a panic spell. What the hell does that mean? And this continues. And their weapons would cut no better than sticks, while his men went without mail and were as wild as dogs or wolves, biting their shields, being as strong as bears or bulls. They killed the people, but neither fire nor iron took effect on them. That is called berserk fury, which I think it's a good time to get into chapter 3 in the berserk fury. What's your idea on that? So he was sort of like not just the general leading the battle charge. He was able to cast spells that amplified the effectiveness of his troops and actually did the opposite to the opposing forces. So what the hell's going on here? And what do you know about berserkers?
Well, there's two aspects of this. There's the paranormal powers, and then there's that other aspect that I get right into is the tech. And I've got a friend there in Las Vegas, Colonel John B. Alexander, who's an old soldier who was involved with this project the U.S. Army ran in 1980, looking into the paranormal and abilities and remote viewing and all this sort of stuff. And his focus since then has been non-lethal weapons. And I read his book, which is a great read, which basically gets right into all the types of weapons, and they all do this sort of stuff, weapons that can make you go blind, weapons that can make you panic, actually move your bowels, just run away. And you've probably seen that sort of stuff. Deafness, well, we don't have much trouble understanding a weapon that could make you deaf. And, when weapons will cut no better than sticks, it's like that either means somehow their weapons became soft or whatever, or the man wielding the weapon couldn't hit. And that's a thing. Like, I don't know if you guys have had it, but when I was a kid, I used to have these dreams where I'd be in a fight. The other guy would be punching me, and my punch was like in slow motion and really weak. It was like boom, boom. And I'd wake up and think, but I'm a pretty good fighter. I know I can hit. But psychologically, something in me thought I was weak. And then over lots of experiences in life, I had dreams where suddenly I was hitting pretty hard. And I realized, how much is in the mind, what you think of yourself. And I think Odin could, one way or the other, make this happen. The thing that I find extremely interesting is that when it says that his people had this berserk fury, they killed the people, but neither fire nor iron took effect on them. If we go back to that previous chapter, I think it's chapter 3. I know that's one where his brothers grab his wife. It's chapter 2. So near the end of chapter 2, do you have it in front of you there, Mike?
I do. Need me to read it? Which part?
Yeah, well, so... read from this. The first page says he was so, and then it starts blessed with victory in every battle. He was the winner, and it came about that his people believed that he was able to assign victory in every battle. So then read the next bit. It was his custom.
It was his custom, if he was sending his men into battle or on other missions, that he first laid his hands on their heads and gave them Bajanak. How do I say that? Yanak. There you go. I'm learning as we go. Yeah. And this continues. They believed that then things would turn out well. So it was some sort of blessing. Continue. It was also the case with his men that whenever they were in trouble on sea or on land, they called on his name and always seemed to get help from that. They believed that all their security depended on him. He often went away so far that he spent many seasons on the journey.
Right. So getting back to Bjarnak, right, this is his men who he's sending on missions through Scandinavia by the sound of it. Now, the general thing, if you look at that note there, you said it, blessing, Bjarnak, they usually say, well, we think this Bjarnak is borrowed from Irish, and it's from Bjarnakt, and from Latin benedicto, blessing. So this is a typical Christian way of thinking about it. And Iceland had a lot of Irish blood, a lot of Irish culture mixed in. It's not so well known, but it's a thing. However, when I went, I didn't buy that for this blessing. It sounds too Christian, He's just going, "Oh, bless you, my son, go out and butcher people." But if you go to the oldest and the best, Cleasby and Vigvason, this Norse English dictionary, it says this word is not blessing. It comes from the old Scottish word bannock, Bannock, which means a sort of a cake. And that's where I thought, and they had their own Christian-y spin, saying, yes, it was considered, it was like the Eucharist. You get the bread and the wine, and it's the body of Christ and blah. So they were sort of trying to say, well, this is, Snorri as a Christian just made this up, thinking that would be what Odin might do. But the fact that it's a bannock size, it's literally exactly the size of the top of your head. And when I was in Denmark, I found these just extraordinary Bronze Age little heads, and they look like aliens. I swear to God, they look like greys. And on their heads, exactly the same size as a bannock would be, they sort of, at first glance, they look like horns, but they're not. They're almost like a trumpet sort of thing. But it's got these weird ridges, and for all the world, it looks like a technological headpiece. It really, for all the world, looks like something you'd have on your head with aerials and maybe little lights or something. And the more I researched this, it came to me that what's being talked about in chapter 6 was when they become berserkers. But it also says, they knew that wherever they were in land and sea, he could find them and help them. When they went into battle, they weren't scared, and they became ferocious fighters. And I just thought, this bannock that he puts on their head just has to be a device that takes control of their brains and turns them into ferocious fighters, and also, puts out some kind of effect over the people they're confronting, so they lose their wits. They literally panic. They can't swing their weapons. And so his guys... Have you seen, that Johnny Depp movie where he melds with the AI because he dies of radioactive poisoning?
The Johnny Mnemonic?
He's like...
Is that what it's called?
No, he's like this super rich guy, and these fanatics, he's developing AI, and it's going to help the world, and these fanatics kill him with a radioactive bullet. And then he enters as he's dying, his wife puts him into the machine, and then he ends up with all these humans who are sort of willingly have these things on their heads, and Johnny Depp, the AI, controls them, and they help him make his dreams come true out in the real world. So that's the idea I've got about this, that I think what we're hearing about here is technology.
Yeah, we've got a couple.
Turns them.
Just real quick, we get help from the chat. Transcendence is the name of the movie. Thanks to Jen. Again, thanks to Jen. Derek the Nice Doctor also added that.
That's it.
Transcendence is the name of that movie. Okay, here's the thing too. So I'm picking up what you're putting down. Now think of it this way. Now imagine there was some way to sort of have a paleo effect of technology. Like you're able to put like an obsidian ring around somebody's head. Okay. And it limited a fear response. You know what I mean? Something just very simply basic like that. Like, and I'm not saying that would be the case. I'm saying you found a way to have some kind of really ancient technology here to be able to do something like that. And it just made your dudes, your side, your guys not afraid. And when you're talking about life and death, as you said, like sometimes you blow the horns of the battle and then people just start crapping themselves. But imagine if your side didn't.
And we're sort of there already.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Our guys in
Absolutely.
battle now are not like just listening out and hoping for the best. They're all linked to the satellites. They're linked to the feed. They can see it in their eyes. They're getting information constantly. They're plotting. And it's only just a sort of a moral step whether you could start, implant it into their brains and have some kind of drugs that turn them into a fearless maniac or whatever the science of neuroscience.
Agreed. And
studied the brain for so long.
You know what's wild, real quick, just as an aside, and I'm not going to elaborate on this. I just want to point this out for the record here, is that we recently had that raid, the American military raid on Venezuela, and abstracted their, a president, however you want to define that guy. He's a bastard. But among many, there are many. But the story was that our military came in and they deployed some weapon that made the entirety of the other side completely lose their nerves. Like some were vomiting blood, some were crapping their pants, their arms and legs were shaking. They could not even like hold and aim their weapons. Like this is the type of thing. And so we see this in a modern day as like a, what's it called? Like the Havana syndrome, like that type of weapon. But and we've seen them deployed.
It's a non-lethal weapons.
Yeah, exactly. Which
Alexander's thing.
Exactly, which runs an entire military brigade inert. They are incapable of defending themselves or anything else in a moment.
Out.
So yeah, exactly. So like I said, I'm not going to elaborate on that. We're running short on time, but I think it's important to point out that type of thing, if you could figure something out like that, and even a tiny edge, like if you had some way to make your dudes not scared when the other dudes are kind of scared, that changes the entire game when you're talking about a zero-sum battle there where somebody wins and somebody loses and somebody lives and somebody dies. We got James on the line here. Let's get to these calls. You're the best, bro. We're going to have you back. You know we're going to have you back. I appreciate you very much. And there's more to get to with this. James in Michigan, you're on Troubled Minds with Mike and Dave. Go ahead, sir. What you got? Tons of stuff here to talk about. Test. James 1-2.
Sorry about that. Had to unmute.
That's okay.
Didn't realize I was muted. Yeah, I'm not with it tonight, but that's okay. Great show. Great to hear from you, Dave, as well. I wanted to. So your experience with the Ravens is fascinating to me because I have heard of accounts from people over the years through different shows I've listened to who have had experiences with sort of these figures associated with, or even the figures themselves of deities or gods, however you want to call that, these entities. And sometimes they weren't even doing anything associated with them, but they would have experiences, not even realize at the time that the symbolism involved was associated with this one figure. So it's fascinating to me that you had this experience because I've heard of similar things. I don't know if you have as well or not, but I just want to point that out because if you look into enough paranormal experiences people have had over the years, that is sort of one type of experience you can find if you look deep enough into these things. And I'm not necessarily even talking about religious experiences, so to speak. That's a whole separate thing. Because, again, some of these experiences people have, they're not looking for that. They're not looking for a religious experience or going through any kind of a ceremony or anything like that. They just have these experiences. So it's really fascinating, and thank you for sharing that experience tonight or earlier.
Oh, no worries, mate. Thank you. And yeah, you're right. It's like you would have heard the stories about people whose relatives who've passed sort of come to them as like, I remember this one was the dad loved butterflies and he had a fascination with this one particular butterfly, which was super rare. And he said to his daughter as he was dying, I will come back to you and give you a message and you'll know it's me. And like in the next week after he died, these butterflies just kept coming, flying into the house and doing all sorts of unusual things for butterflies. And she just knew it was her dad. It was sending a message through them saying, I'm okay, it's all good.
Yes. Yeah, and animals, I mean, all kinds of animals have been used in that way or sent as signs in that way. Butterflies, birds, cats, dogs, in some cases, all these things. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to say on that. I know you have another call here, so I will get going, but great show, and thank you for taking my call as usual.
You're the best, James. Appreciate you very much. You know where to find him, Salsido Paranormal, SALSIDO paranormal.com, troubledminds.org/friends. Scroll down, says follow James. And while you're down there, of course, follow Dave Lovegrove. It says Viking Superpowers. Lots of stuff here. And look, recognize that this entire saga is massive. And Dave simply pointed out, he's like, hey, there's like a weird space here, like chapter 6 and 7. We could probably talk about it. It's like about Odin and wizards. And I was like, hell yeah, bro, you had me at wizards. Let's do this. Let's absolutely do this. And this is what I mean. When you look at the past and look at the future and kind of how the present, makes a connection between the two. We are that space. We live here. This is our world too. And so we're able to kind of think about things a little differently. Anything to add to what James said? We got Derek on the line, and then we'll wrap this up. Dave, you're the best. Appreciate you being here.
No worries. No, that was a great question. I'd like to hear from. Looking forward to hearing from. The Night. The Night Stalker, Derek. Let's do it. Night Stalker.
We know how to do this. So we got a thing here. Is this the button?
Yep.
Derek in Massachusetts, the Night Stalker. What's up, brother? You're on Troubled Minds with Mike and Dave. What you got for us, man? Like, there's so much here. This is wild and crazy. We could probably do part 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 of this. But what do you got? Let's hear the Night Stalker sauce.
Yeah, I'll be quick. We'll wrap it up. I don't want to call too late, but I mean, this is fascinating, and I never really considered Odin as much of like a wizard, but I guess that definitely seems like what he is. It's really fascinating. They're kind of they do kind of show that a little bit in the MCU, like especially in the first movie. Basically, his only feat of power, pretty much, is to like do that little incantation to make the Thor's hammer only work if you're like worthy of it, So he says a little something, like whisper something into the hammer, and creates like a little seal over it and stuff. So I guess he was tossing out spells in that movie, I guess, which I didn't really consider until you brought it up, which is cool. And then just in general, I'm fascinated by these gods teaching people stuff, teaching people like metallurgy and arts and magic and all that kind of stuff. But with the blessing and like that cake you talk about and stuff, it reminds me a lot of like the in Batman, the Scarecrow fear toxin, like some kind of gas or whatever. You can go and everybody start freaking out, and your worst nightmares will happen. Especially like if Odin is some kind of shamanic figure, then the plant medicine aspect is obviously big with shamans and stuff. So I wonder if there is some type of, like, you mentioned shrooms earlier, and obviously like shrooms have a hippie connotation with us now, but I know like Graham Hancock brings up the fact that the Aztecs, who when they were like ritually slaughtering people and stuff, they like on temples and like really had a crazy bloodlust. They were also taking mushrooms and stuff. So mushrooms have a set and setting aspect of it. So if you're in a setting that's holistic and nice and open for blessings, you're going to have some kind of miracle happen. But if you're in some kind of MK Ultra dungeon or some kind of war setting or some kind of like riled up setting, then it can rile you up in the same way. It can take you to a dark place, especially mixed with like a PCP or cocaine or meth derivative and stuff. Like they've been pumping soldiers full of stuff that makes them not feel stuff for a long time. Like Hitler was definitely doing that and everything. So I wonder if the cut no better than sticks thing, or the fire couldn't affect them. Like, did they die? Yeah. Like, were they immortal, or were they just not feeling pain? So you can like kind of like chop their arm off. They're going to keep coming at you like a PCP zombie or something like that, But it doesn't really fit as much with the they can call out Odin's name and answer. That's a little bit more mystical than just PCP. So probably it's not that. But I just wanted to throw that into the mix. And just a question is with the shapeshifting thing, they talk about Zeus and like Loki and stuff, and the Greek gods doing the same thing. Like, do you think that those gods in that pantheon are similar? They're kind of more shamanic, high technology figures, and they've been kind of confused as gods, or think they're similar, or is it even like the same ascended masters under different names? Or how do you think like those shapeshifting lore and those kind of pantheons will fit into the Norse pantheons? Are they similar? But that's all I got.
Yeah. Well, I think that something I've learned through writing this book and writing the next book, which is more about this sort of stuff, the human experience of these, advanced beings and their teachings and their abilities, is that there's a science that we're still sort of stuck in the steam age, as it were. If, you know, somebody like a steampunk sort of person would look at our high digital tech, it would be bewildering because it's just not that mechanical. It's like all this stuff's happening, but how the hell is it happening? In the steam age, you could see it. You could see everything pumping. It was brass, and you put oil on it, filled it down, and heated it up, and all that sort of thing. And I think what we're looking at in these stories all over the world, as you said, in the Greek stories, Roman stories, and definitely in these Norse stories, is encounters with either our distant ancestors who went off world, 500,000 years ago, and then eventually came back from out there in the galaxy, or they were extraterrestrials, maybe our original ancestors from somewhere else. But it's a technology that it's way ahead of us, which means people are already acknowledging, okay, we need to find out what consciousness is. This is, quantum discoveries, which have been around for a long time, have, made people. I remember my science teacher saying to me, senior chemistry, I think, he says, look, we taught you this shell, like an atom has got the nucleus and then there's all these electrons and blah, blah, but actually it's not like that at all. And I said, yeah, well, what does it mean, this cloud thing you're talking about? He says, well, it's hard to believe it is. Nothing really exists until somebody observes it, and then it just sets. And I said to him, that sounds like,
magic.
Thought. Yeah, magic. It sounds like, a dream, consciousness thing. And I could see in his eyes, he was a little freaked out. He knew much more than me, and he was like, yeah, it's weird. And I think that's definitely where we're going. We're up against the old guard who refuses to let go of materialism because this stuff's too frightening to them. It does feel like magic and probably the devil's work or something. But really, I think what we see in the stories of the old gods is technology, but technology that's somehow alive, machines that are alive. And I got a taste of this. Have you heard of William Gibson?
No.
You got to read his novels. Everybody's listening.
Same note.
William Gibson, looking him up, his early stuff, Neuromancer.
Oh, yeah, yes, I know Neuromancer, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's like 3 novels, Count Zero and something Chrome, I think. But, wow, this guy's writing in the 80s, and it's like stuff in there that we're only just starting to get to now. But what really freaked me out was one story about this guy who he escapes from a corporation. He knows all this stuff. The corporate ninjas are coming for him. Hasn't got much time. And this spacecraft just drops in, but it's literally a robot, right? And it says to him, jump in the back. There's a G-net. I'm sorry, but you're going to lose consciousness because I've got to get out of here as fast as hell. So he gets in there and the thing takes off at like 30 Gs and he, he just blacks out. And he comes to, it's jumped to the other side of the world. The machine says to him, okay, look, you'll be safe. This is who you go and see. Prints out a little thing, go and find this guy. I'm going to hide here. And then he gets out and then the craft, it's like a jet or something, but it creeps underneath these bushes and camouflages itself. And for me, that was a eureka moment. I went, holy crap. That's where we're going. Yes, of course. I think in the old way, I'm thinking there's a jet and there's a car and there's a gun and there's a computer. But that's obviously where we're going into virtually, you'd have to call them living things that perform super functions. And yeah.
Is it? Do you think that's for like all of the kind of different realms of the kind of Aegis and stuff in Norse mythology? Like if there's like dark entities or dark elves or things that other religions would call demons or stuff like that, is that also, you think, kind of a dark shamanism or some kind of similar advanced technology that looks like magic but working sinisterly? Or is there a group of high technology shamans that also have a relationship with like spiritual entities? Do they both exist in this mythology, or is it one or the other?
Yeah, I think there's definitely nasties and Definitely entities that are not human-like, and we know from modern accounts by people that there's these Nordics who are very human and seem benevolent, and then there's others who are sort of reptilian or insectoid and all this stuff. I mean, you're just going on other people's accounts, but it seems like it's been going on forever. And in my book, sorry to pitch my book, but the first chapter, I just want to try to win over a few people who think, oh, what a lot of crap, Viking gods and flying saucers, how can that be connected? So I sort of talk about all these statements. By
You're in the right place. We're with you, brother. We love it here.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're in the right place, man. You're absolutely in the right place. Buy Dave's book. Links are in the top. So scroll down just a little bit. Links are all in the top. Go buy his book. It's on Amazon. Look at the reviews on that, by the way. He sold a ton of books. He's been on a bunch of like larger, way big type of podcasts, and he's selling a ton of books. So please go check out those reviews if you don't believe me. I've read it. He sent me a copy. It's incredible. Please help our friends. Let's wrap this up, boys.
All right. Thank you, guys. That's all I got. Great show, you guys. Awesome stuff.
You're the best, Derek.
Cheers, mate.
Come back, please. Thank you. Later.
Thank you very much. That Derek the Night Stalker, you know me, love him. Go give him a follow too. Look, it's free. He's got a YouTube channel. It's free. troubledminds.org. Click the friends link or /friends. Scroll down. Follow the Night Stalker. It's under N Night Stalker, and it's a YouTube channel, completely free. Brilliant guy. Been a good friend for a long time, as you know, and always slaying the fire ideas. But yeah, we'll definitely look. We get to the good advantage that we have of kind of having the digital radios. We can go a little long when we need to or whatever. And I think tonight is certainly worthy of that because we have a master here, a master. Like I called you a master 3 times tonight. Should I do it 7 or how do we invoke this ritual to make you believe you're the master? Anyway,
I believe it in the end.
Anyway, David Lovegrove, a master. I said it a 4th time. We'll leave it at that. So we kind of leave the spells ambiguous. Okay. Final thought, and then let's wrap this up. And we will come back to this because look, there's so much here. And we did like chapter 6 and chapter 7 and part of chapter 3 of this thing. And it's so rich. It's so dense. It's so incredible when you kind of, again, frame it with new eyes. So you know me, you know us, you're definitely welcome back. Final thought, and then now let's wrap it up.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for platforming this. And what I've found is a sense of wonder that this has never been talked about much. And it's in an interesting place because when you think of crusades, you always think about Christendom versus, the Muslim world, the Saracens, etc. And historically, yes, that went on for a long, long time, these battles between the two religions and taking territory back and forth and whatever. But that the early taking of the Germanic kingdoms and the Celtic kingdoms by the Roman Church, way back like 400 AD, they started into Europe. That was actually a crusade, but it's never been called a crusade because it doesn't fit the narrative that Christians are the goodies. And, I'm not talking whether they are the goodies or not, or that sort of thing, but I get just saying that the ancient knowledge of the North was viciously suppressed from very early on. And so for me, it's funny because people take people looking at the Bible very seriously, but when it comes to this, it is really forgotten. It does exist amazingly in Marvel. They did a great job helping people remember this stuff, but generally people don't remember that we had a different faith before Christianity, and they wouldn't realize there is so much to know about it. And what it really is, they just think, oh, there's just sort of dumb, primitive Viking types, bloodthirsty savages. But when you study them, you realize these guys are really civilized, and they're actually much more civilized than others at times. And they treated women really well, according to the standards of the times, and they had a special sort of honor. And that it's just been demonized because it was just too different, and what it ends up to be, I think, is not a religion. It's a spiritual path, it's a way of being human. It's very powerful and liberating, and that's why it was squashed. because it was, Gnostic. It was like, hey, you can have your own connection to nature, to whatever you want to call the higher powers. You can discover it for yourself. This is what we know from our stories, but it's up to you. They didn't really push it on people. They didn't kill them for not believing it. And there's no stories about the Vikings going around killing Christians saying you will believe in Odin and Thor or you die. There's just really isn't any stories like that. So
yeah,
I feel lucky to be looking at it, with a new eye.
Same. And I feel lucky to have you as part of this conversation, because I think that's exactly the point. We're all looking at that past with a new eye, trying to recognize where we went wrong. Let's say with our own faith, maybe, or not. Like I said, you change that, you decide that. That's not my thing. That's your thing. That's your personal thing collectively. But I recognize fully that there's a ton of things happening that may or may not be accurate. And so let's talk about them. And look, sometimes I know it's uncomfortable, but I think it's important to talk about. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, all I was going to say is part of what I'm into is that with AI, with the robotics, with, inserting stuff into our brains, people melding with the AI, this future world we're sort of sleepwalking into, whether we want to or not, I think this is Ragnarok. I think this is the actual, I don't want to be pessimistic. I don't think it's necessarily going to be really terrible, but
David, let's start a religion. Let's do this. Let's just do this right now. Yeah. we're sending out the robes. You guys send us your sizes. The end is nigh. It will be Ragnarok. It will be fiery, and it will be glorious. I'm only half kidding. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think I call it Viking superpowers to make it sexy, but it's not really just about Vikings. It's about humans. I think these are all human things. Doesn't matter where you came from or where you live now or what language you speak, but these are suppressed bits of knowledge that can lead us to become able to warp reality, basically to resist anything evil going on by means other than, it's useless to stand in front of a tank. If the guy in the tank's got a heart, it can't affect it, or he might just run you over. But this is talking about something else. This is talking about the ability to change fate, to warp reality, to change minds, to put, whatever into the enemy. And it could even be love. Like love is a human power that bad people don't understand. But just to show love to your enemy can do incredible things. I've experienced it myself. I'm sure everybody listening has, where you've done an act of kindness unexpectedly, and they're like, "What the hell?" Like, "What are you doing? Why are you being kind to me? I'm being mean to you." And it can change somebody. So, and the knowledge of life after death is another big one. Like, if you think that you're going to be snuffed out, well, you better go with the program, whatever it is, because this is all you got. But if you believe that you're an eternal soul and you'll keep coming back, or you go, you might think that you're going to go to a heavenly place and stay there. But whatever way you think, this is definitely not the end. So that puts everything into perspective. And that's a superpower in itself,
Amen.
Makes people very difficult to beat.
Amen, brother. And you're in the right place. Like these are the types of sentiments we need to hear, we need to talk about, we need to think about together, because that egregore, as you described, of love itself is undefeated. It'll live forever. And you can stomp it, you can murder it, you can break it in half, you can throw it in the gutter. But guess what happens? People trust each other.
Yeah.
Eventually, people will come back to each other. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. You remember the movie, I consider it probably the greatest kung fu movie ever. What is it? The names escape me. It's set in China. It's a Chinese language movie.
You lost me there. I haven't seen any of that. But I'm going to say the greatest kung fu movie ever is Kung Fu Hustle. And go ahead and slay me for that.
That's the movie.
Is that the movie?
That's the movie I'm trying to say.
Is that seriously the movie? You got to be kidding me. I think it's incredible.
No, that's what I was going to say.
You got to be kidding me.
But the thing is, where he's just such a shit, right? That's my word for the day, shit, because I'm allowed to say that. But he is just a shit, that guy. And, he breaks the heart of that beautiful little deaf girl who loves him all through life, and he crushes the candy cane that she's kept since they were kids because he defended her against bullies. And, he's just a reprehensible character. But then when the frog dude stomps his head into the ground and he's well and truly dead, and then those two really cool, chain smoking lady with curlers in her hair and
it's so good. Hey, do yourselves a favor, guys. If you've never seen Kung Fu Hustle and you have no idea what we're talking about, that was a massive synchronicity, because it's literally like he said, the best Kung Fu movie ever made. Like, I've only seen like 5 ever, but that's the one that came to mind, and we were talking about the same movie. Kung Fu Hustle. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good.
What an awesome movie. And, I have to say, this is the 8th time, but I am considered a Kung Fu master, and it's not because I'm super limber and I can do the splits or jump 10 feet in the air. It's that I understand the way the mind works in creating power, but also it's a connection to sort of a creativity. And when I watch that scene where they wrap him up and they do all this stuff and they bring him back, and then he fights all the axe gang and the frog master, the toad master, I had tears in my eyes. I was like, wow, this is beautiful. And when he does the Buddha palm, the frog guy kicks him up into the sky and he goes right up, and then there's like an eagle flies past, and I think he steps on the eagle's back, and then he comes down in like this prayer posture.
Yep. And
just sort of floats to the ground, and then the frog masters look at him with bulging eyes, and the guy puts his Buddha palm up and just slight movement goes whoom, and it just takes the whole building out in the shape of a giant hand just beside where the frog guy is. And he's just got this serene look on his face like Buddha, and then the frog guy just hits the deck and goes, Sifu, please teach me, Sifu. That was just Kung Fu heaven for me. It was like, yes.
If you guys aren't into Kung Fu, if you guys aren't into Kung Fu at all, and you're like, it's not my thing, go watch that one. That one. It is the greatest of all time. We both agree.
Very funny.
Look, the master, Dave Lovegrove, agrees, and I agree, and I'm just a noob, that is the greatest Kung Fu movie of all time. Dave, you're the best. I appreciate you very much for being here. We're gonna look. Hey, we didn't even get to chapter 7. We didn't even get to the spells of Odin. We're gonna do this, okay? So let's do this. You do a little digging and find some additional stuff that fits in the sagas themselves. Any additional information that comes from your mind and your translations you've done. We'll do a part 2. This is incredible. I know you got a friend to get to. Let's get you out of here. I appreciate you very much, and your time and your knowledge and your energy, and just you, Master Dave. Thanks for hanging out, brother. Appreciate you. Please give him a follow. Look, go buy his books. Look, he's written a book. There's more coming. Links in the description. It's on Amazon. You can probably buy it today, get it tomorrow, because Amazon's that voodoo wicked. But also, if you're like, it's tight right now, I can't spend some money, do spend the money. If you can't, go follow his YouTube channel. It's totally free. Links are in the description. It's right on top. You cannot miss it. Scroll down just a little bit after the little blurb when it starts, and then please go follow this man. He's putting out amazing content, shorts, medium videos, long videos. He's actually going to these places and talking about these ideas. David Lovegrove, you're a master, and I've called you that 5 times now. That's a sacred number. We'll leave it at that. I appreciate you very much. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great night.
Thanks, Mike. Same to you. See you later, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. That's it. Help our friends. Please go buy his books. Please. Just trying to wrap this up. Look, I could talk. I and we and us, the whole group, could talk to Dave forever. We'll get back to him. Okay. There's so many great comments about David Lovegrove in the chat. I appreciate him. You appreciate him. We appreciate him. There's a lot of ideas floating out in the air. Let's consider them. Let's talk about them. That's that. Look, if you want to help Troubled Minds, help our friends. Do the thing. Help. Go buy David's books. go follow his YouTube channel, follow our friends, help our friends as well. TroubledMinds.org/friends. That's the whole point of doing this. This is not about me. This is about us. And recognize that you are part of a larger consciousness network that is not simply yourself. That's it. And if you ever doubt that, if you ever doubt that, come back and recognize what's happened here in this space. Just come recognize. I've learned an immense amount of information and goodwill and kindness from you guys, and love and generosity and etc. so on. And I hope I do my part to pass it on. That's it. Look, it's simple. Some things are simple. And that egregore of love that cannot be conquered, let's embody it. Let's make sure that no matter how many tanks or how many bombs or how many nonsensical things happen in the world, that we still stand up for ourselves and stand up for each other. That's that. I don't know. Other than that, this one goes out to David Lovegrove, Viking Superpowers in Australia. Be sure, be strong, be true. Thank you for listening. From our troubled minds to yours, have a great night.